This week in the discussion for Chapter 8 for CIST 1510, we're going to look at improving HTML forms. As we see when we start our form example, this is the beginning web page. There's no information about the forms. There's no way to submit the forms. We have no idea what information goes in which field. So we're going to be correcting all this and updating these forms. You'll be working with both the index.html and the style CSS. I went ahead and completed a lot of the first step by putting my name, file name, and the dates in both of these files. And also make sure that you link your style sheet in the heading section, the head section of your index HTML file. Another task in the first section is to indent all nested elements and place input elements on their own line. Also add a blank line elements as you feel they are appropriate to improve readability. Okay, they're talking about the form down here in your HTML file. So in this, you may need to put blank files and put your input files types on their own line. This makes it easier for you to read and easier for you to work with the form elements that we'll be working with in this discussion. And then also make sure you put your closing form tag on its own line as well. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to check this task off and we'll move on to the second task. Okay, so we're going to review the form elements within the index HTML and add label elements to all the input controls. We want to make sure that we also include the for attribute as well. So in here we see that we got input type text, the name is set as first name, IDs, and so forth. Let me put this one on its own tab here. So in here, I'm going to add labels to these. So I'm going to copy and paste these in the interest of time. So I've got here, I'm going to set it up as a label. And I put it for the F name. So it's going to link it to this field, to this input form. And then so I'll put first name here as well. And then we'll put some spaces in between each one of these. We'll look and see how this changes when we refresh our page. So now we have a label. We know that this first box is for the first name for our customer's information. So we're going to do this for each one. We have our label. Now this one's set for the last name. See, it corresponds with the input. Last name, this is the text that's going to be appearing as the label. And we'll refresh, and we'll see that appear. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of these in. And we'll put one in for email address. Once again, I like to add space so I can keep everything where it's easier to read. And then we're going to label one for the phone number. So the credit card name with the name on the card. Then we'll get the card number. Expiration date will be next. And then finally the CCV number. So we'll refresh this and see that we now have labels for all of our fields. So now we at least know what information goes into what field. It's very key though that you make sure that you include the for attribute. Okay, that's what links those two together. So the input top, and that's where it links it to the form or the label. All right, so now we're going to wrap the form elements within two separate field set elements. So we're going to look at our forms here and decide where we're going to break this up. So what should be our first field set and what should be our last or second one. So looking at these, we can see that we've got these broke down into really two groups. We have our customer information, which includes the last name, first name, email address, and phone number. And then we have our credit card information. So we have our name on the card, card number, expiration date, and then the CVV, the numbers on the back of your card. So we're going to break those down into two different field sets with each one of these. And for this, we're simply just going to start with the right. Okay. We'll add a field set here. Make sure you close the tag. I'll put a little space there. We'll close this field set. And we'll open another one here. We're going to close it before we close the form. We'll run the check on this. And you see I have an error here that I didn't close that field set. So we'll do a check here. See that now we've got these broken down into two different groups. Okay, so now we're going to put a legend in for each field set. So this is going to tell the user what information goes in there. So we're going to put this right under our field sets. So our first field set up here, we're going to put the legend tag. We're going to put it customer information, then close the legend tag. Same for the payment information located down at the bottom here. So we'll look at how this changes. Now we see we have our payment information, customer information. So we now have a legend. So users what information is going into these fields and also breaking them down into two different sections. So now that we've created this, users can now put their information, their customer information, their payment information. We still have the problem though that they cannot get us this information. There's no way for them to submit this to us. So we're going to fix that in the next step. So in the next step, we're going to look at our index HTML file. We're going to add a submit button below the second field set. Still within the form. And here we're going to include the class attribute with a value of btn. So in here, we'll start with the input, and we're going to set it top equal to submit. The value is going to be submit, so that's what will show up in our button. And then we set the class to btn. We'll see how this looks now that we've all got a submit button. And as you get into JavaScript and PHP, you'll be working more with those and actually having that submit to either a server side to a server or maybe to your client. Okay, so now we're going to add a placeholder attribute with the value of the months and the years to the expiration date. So we see the expiration date here. So we're going to add a placeholder to this. So up here in the expiration date, after the ID, we'll add the placeholder. So we use the keyword placeholder saying this is what we're putting here, and then the format. And the tag, so we're adding the month and the year. So now we're going to work with our styles. So we're going to create a style rule for the field set and input elements. That's going to set the bottom margin to 2%. So we're looking here, first of all, pay attention to where it tells you. So we're going to look for the form elements. So we got the style rules for form elements. So we're going to create one that's got for the field set and input. So we're using two different tags, HTML tags, that we're going to set the same value for. Now, when you're setting your margins, we've talked about if you've got the top and bottom the same, you can use just one value and then a different value for the left and right if they're the same. So in this case, we're not changing the margins on the top, left, or right. So we do need to specify that we're just changing the bottom margin to 2%. And we'll see how this affects our page. So we see our form has been updated a little bit. We're also going to create a style rule for the field set and legends. It's going to set the font size to 1.25 and make the font bold. Once again, because we're using two different HTML tags in this, the field set and legend, we will define it as such so we can use the same settings on this. We don't have to go in and put field set, font weight, bold, font size, and then legend, and put the same information. We can combine these as we have here, and we'll see the change here that's going to take place with our text. Move this footer element down to give us a little more room to work with. All right, so next I'm going to create a style rule for the label. It's going to set the display to block, and it's going to set the padding top to 3%. Once again, because we're specifying that it's only going to be the top padding, we do have to specify in our code that we are only applying it to the padding top. So we'll see that we now have changes to block settings, and we've added padding to this. Next, we're going to create a style rule for that BTN class selector. It's going to remove the border. It's going to set the top and bottom margins to 0, the left and right margins to auto. We're going to set the display to block and set the padding to 5%. Then we're going to set the background color, the font size, and the border radius, and the color to white. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this class. And we'll look at the settings here. First, we're going to define it as the class. So we define a class with a period and then the class name. So we're going to set our border to none. So we remove the border. Set the top and bottom margins to 0 and the left and right to auto. So you see that this one is a little different than how we did it in the last couple of sections. First, I'm going to make sure that I put it in the correct place, as I put it in the wrong one. Okay, so I'm going to move it back up into the correct place under the label. So you see here that I can just specify that because I'm setting the top and bottom to the same value, I can specify this with one number. And the same with the left and right. Because I'm setting them to the same value, I can specify it with this one, in this case, keyword of auto. Setting the display to block. I'm going to set the padding to 5%. The background color, the font size, the border radius set to 10 pixels. And then finally, my color is set to white. So we'll see the change that'll take place on this class in here. So in the submit button, this is what has that class selected. So let's look at this one more time. I'm going to cut this out. This is where our submit button is when we put it in with no attributes applied to the class. Then we add the class information. We'll see that the submit button is now moved over to this area and all of the other changes. So we'll run this check. This one will take a while for it to go through. There's a lot of information it's checking with MonTap. Okay, so now I'm going to move down and add a following style rules to the tablet media query. So see down at the bottom of my page, I have my media query for tablet layout. So first, I'm going to create a style rule for the form element. It's width to 80%, top and bottom margins to 0, and then the left and right margins to auto. I got my form, the width set to 80, and my margin set to 0 and auto. So now we've got the margin set. Get our form a little bit better how we want it to look. So we're now going to create a style rule for the grid class. It's going to set the grid, the display to grid, and it's going to, the column values are going to be set to auto and auto, and the gap between the grids are 20 pixels. So let's look back at our HTML. Let's see, where is this going to be applied? So this is applied to our form. So everything that's inside of that form tags, this grid class is going to be applied to. So in here we got the display set to grid. Set our grid template columns to auto and auto. So this is our left and right, top and bottom, and our grid gap to 20. So we'll see how this changes. So now we've got these set up a little closer to our finished product. So next we're going to create a style rule for the BTN class that sets the grid column value and the padding. So we'll see our submit button move to where it's really centered as well. Okay, so next you need to validate your CSS files and the HTML files. If you find any errors, go back and correct those. You should not have any errors though following this video. After you get through this video, I want you to go back to Blackboard and answer the question, write your 100-word post about what are 3 steps you could use to further improve this form. You'll also need to comment on at least 2 other students' posts with at least 50 words each. In their comments, you should be offering suggestions. Looking at what they are offering to improve their forms, and then make suggestions and maybe to improve more of what they have, or maybe you see something that would cause an issue with your forms. Once you're finished with this, don't forget to validate that last step, as I almost did. This is another one that will take a few minutes for it to validate and pass. Once you make sure you go through here and submit your assignment as well.